Hare Krishna devotees, uh, thank you very much for the opportunity for reading the from Srimad Bhagavatam. Today we are reading Canto 3, Chapter 19, Text 33. Before that, do pranam mantras. Om Ajnanaतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगण ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्त राधा कान्त नमोऽस्तुते। तप्त काञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरि वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमो ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वती व्यासं ततो जयं मुदीरये। शुश्रूषोषद्धधानस्य वासुदेव कथारुचिः स्यान्मत्सेवया विप्र पुण्यतीर्थनिषेवनात्। शृण्वतं स्वकतः कृष्ण पुण्यश्रवणकीर्तन हृदयान्तस्थो ह्यभद्राणि विदुनोति सुहृत्सतां। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिकी। तदा रजस्तमो भावा कामलोभादयश्च ये चेतयेतैरनाविद्धं स्थितं सत्त्वे प्रसीदति। एवं प्रसन्नमनसो भगवद्भक्तियोगतः भगवत्तत्त्वविज्ञानं मुक्तसङ्गस्य जायते। विद्यते हृदयः ग्रन्थिश्चित्यन्ते सर्वसंशया क्षीयन्ते चास्य कर्माणि दृष्ट एवात्मनीश्वरे। Thank you again for joining for this morning Bhagavatam reading. Reading from Canto 3, Chapter 19, Text 33. Sutta Uvacha Iti Kaushara Ashrutya Bhagavat Katham Chattanandam Param Leve Mahabhagavato Dvija. Sutta Uvacha Iti Kaushara Ashrutya Bhagavat Katham Chattanandam Param Leve महाभागवतो द्विजा सूत उवाच इति कौशारवाक्याताम् आश्रित्य भगवत्कथाम् शतानन्दम् परं लेभे महाभागवतो द्विजा सूतः Suta Goswami Uvacha said Iti thus Kausharava from Maitreya son of Kushara Akyatam told Ashritya having heard Bhagavat Katham the narration about the Lord Kshatta Vidura Anandam bliss Param transcendental Lebe achieved Mahabhagavata the great devotee Dvija O Brahmana Shaunaka. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Sri Suta Goswami continued, My dear Brahmana, Kshatta Vidura, the great devotee of the Lord, achieved a transcendental bliss by hearing the narration of the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead from the authoritative source of the sage Kausharava Maitreya, and he was very pleased. Purport: If anyone wants to derive transcendental pleasure by hearing the pastimes of the Lord, he must hear from the authoritative source, as explained here. Maitreya heard the narration from his bona fide spiritual master, and Vidura also heard from Maitreya. One becomes an authority simply by presenting whatever he has heard from his spiritual master, and one who does not accept a bona fide spiritual master cannot be an authority. This is clearly explained here. If one wants to have transcendental pleasure, he must find a person with authority. It is also stated in the Bhagavatam, that simply by hearing from an authoritative source, with the ear and the heart, one can realize the pastimes of the Lord. Otherwise, it is not possible. Sanatana Goswami, therefore, has especially warned that one should not hear anything about the personality of Lord from the lips of a non-devotee. Non-devotees are considered to be like serpents. As milk is poisoned by a serpent's touch, so although the narrations of the pastimes of the Lord is as pure as milk, when administered by serpent-like non-devotees, it becomes poisonous. Not only does it have no effect in transcendental pleasure, but it is dangerous also. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has warned that no description of the pastimes of the Lord should be heard from the Mayavada or impersonalist school. He has clearly said, Mayavada Bhasha Sunile Haya Sarvanasha. If anyone hears the Mayavadi's interpretation of the pastimes of the Lord, or their interpretation of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, or any other Vedic literature, then he is doomed. Once one is associated with the impersonalist, he can never understand the personal feature of the Lord and his transcendental pastimes. So the Goswami was speaking to the sages heard by Shaunaka, and therefore he addressed them in this verse as Dvija. Twice more. The sages assembled in Naimisharanya, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam from Suta Goswami, were all Brahmanas. But to acquire the qualifications of Brahmana is not everything. Merely to be twice born is not perfection. Perfection is attained when one hears the pastimes and activities of the Lord from bona fide source. So, to put things in context, the chapter 19 is titled as the killing of demon Hiranyaksha. So actually the description of the killing happens in this chapter with all the dramatic descriptions of the fight, the war between the Lord and Hiranyaksha. So the Lord, in the form of the boar, he ultimately kills demon Hiranyaksha. The description is very dramatic in the sense he just hits in his uh, root of the ear. Probably this must be a big slap kind of thing, right? When you slap on the root of the ear, the demon just dies. And when Anutopra was here, he was actually describing that when the demon was showing his prowess and his mystic powers, Lord was allowing it. Please go on, go on, go on. And after some time, he feels like, oh, you are still here. Like Lord feels like kind of a bored, and you are still here, like with an indifference. The word Srila Prabhupada uses. He simply slaps the demon and he dies. Right. So it's a very dramatic description. And now this particular verse 33 in the section where uh, glories of the Lord's activities are described. Like that is, when we hear the pastimes of the Lord, what is the effects? What are the transformations that the speaker and the hearer will undergo? Uh, is given here. There are many places it's given in Bhagavatam, but this particular verse uh, specifically tells how did Vidura felt when Maitreya was describing this pastime, right, in the forest. So that is the context. And as we know, the most inner dialogue in Bhagavatam is Sukadeva Goswami is discussing Bhagavatam with Parikshit Maharaj, and little bit one more medium outer dialogue, I can say it, is Sruta Goswami. No, it is actually Maitreya speaking Bhagavatam to Vidura, and another outer loop, you can say that it is Sutta Goswami explaining Bhagavatam, describing Bhagavatam to sages of Naimisharanya. So sages of Naimisharanya here described as Dvija. Specifically, it is addressing Shaunaka Rishi. And Prabhupada, at the end of the purport, he says that all the people who are hearing the Naimisharanya sages were all Brahmanas. And those Brahmanas were not just Brahmanas by birth or namesake, rubber stamp Brahmanas. They're actual Brahmanas. They acquire the qualification by hearing from their spiritual masters. So Prabhupada makes a comment here. Merely to be twice born is not a perfection. Perfection is attained when one hears the pastimes and activities of the Lord from bona fide source. Because when one hears from a bona fide source, their heart becomes transformed and they will become happy. They actually relish the pastimes. So, in fact, that is the essence of message for the today's class. That when Kshata in this verse, Vidura is described as Kshata. I'm not sure why. I'm sure there is a backstory for that, but I'm not sure if anyone in the call, if no, they can describe at the end. Kshata is Vidura. He is the great devotee of the Lord Mahabhagavata. That's also described here in this verse directly. Lord achieved transcendental bliss by hearing the narration of the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of God. The pastime specifically here described is the Lord Varaha killing Hiranyaksha. And from the authoritative source of the sage Kausharava, Maitreyaman. Again, here the Sanskrit word used is Kaushara, means son of Kushara. Again, I don't know the complete backstory, who is Kushara and how Maitreya was born. from the Kaushara and all. But we understand that it's Maitreya. And when Maitreya spoke this subject matter of the pastime, Vidura became really happy, particularly because he was a devotee of the Lord, a great devotee of the Lord. And also Maitreya Muni is a bona fide source, the authority who can speak the Bhagavatam. And he was very pleased by this narration, and he became really transcendently blissful. Okay? So now, going into the past purport of Srila Prabhupada describing this in detail. So Prabhupada is starting the purport with, if anyone wants to derive transcendental pleasure by hearing the pastimes of the Lord, he must hear from the authoritative source as explained here. So Prabhupada is telling that it's like a prerequisite to become happy by experiencing or hearing the pastimes of the Lord. One has to hear from a bona fide source or a qualified person. Otherwise, we might hear the sound vibration, but one will not have transformations, or one will not have that experience of happiness, pleasure of hearing the pastimes. And there is a generic statement Prabhupada makes, and he's saying that in this verse, Maitreya heard the narration from his bona fide spiritual master. In fact, his spiritual line is explained in the previous chapters. I don't remember exactly which chapter, but he, if I remember correctly, it comes from Kumara. It is actually starting with Ananta, I think. Lord Ananta's pastimes were described. Then the knowledge comes to Kumaras, and Kumaras it passed on. There is it is explained in the previous chapters. What is the disciple of Maitreya Muni? But interestingly, Maitreya has some impersonal conceptions. He was not a pure devotee until he heard from the Lord when the Lord was about to leave this material world. The Lord spoke transcendental messages to Uddhava, and during that time Maitreya was present. And our acharyas say that that's when Maitreya completely becomes attracted to the Lord, and he becomes a pure devotee. But in any case, he heard from the bona fide spiritual masters, so he's qualified to speak Bhagavatam. And when one hears from persons like Maitreya or in his disciple section, one becomes happy. In this case, Vidura heard from Maitreya and he became really happy. And Prabhupada says that one becomes an authority simply by presenting whatever he has heard from spiritual master, and one who does not accept a bona fide spiritual master cannot be an authority. So now, to experience pleasure, one has to hear from an authoritative source. Now, Prabhupada is saying how one becomes an authority. The authority is one who hears from previous authority. So that is basically the concept of discipleship. Prabhupada is saying, and he's telling in both positive and negative direction. Positive is one has to hear from the spiritual master, and one cannot become a bona fide authority if he doesn't have spiritual authority. He doesn't hear from his spiritual master. So, and if one wants to have transcendental pleasure, he must find a person with authority. It is also stated in the Bhagavatam that simply by hearing from an authoritative source with the ear and heart, one can relish the pastimes of the Lord. Otherwise, it is not possible. So Prabhupada is quoting a Bhagavatam source which actually proves this point. It is also stated in the Bhagavatam that simply by hearing from authoritative source with the ear and the heart, one can relish the pastimes of the Lord. Otherwise, it is not possible. I tried to search quickly, but I did not immediately find the exact words, even though there are many indirect indications to this effect. If any one of you on the call knows the exact reference, we can discuss. And next part of the purport in this paragraph, Prabhupada is actually talks about who we should not hear from, because it's actually dangerous and it won't give obviously the transcendental pleasure, and it is actually dangerous for our spiritual advancement. So Prabhupada, in the first part of the purport, he emphasizes whom we have to hear from, and the second part of the purport of this paragraph, he emphasizes whom we should not hear from. Srimad Bhagavatam, right? And he describes that Sanatana Goswami therefore has especially warned that one should not hear anything about the personality of the Lord from the lips of a non-devotee. Non-devotees are considered to be like serpents, as milk is poisoned by serpent's touch. So although the narration of the pastimes of the Lord is as pure as milk, when administered by serpent, like non-devotees become poisonous. And he also quotes the Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's reference in this regard. And he says that Mayavada Bhasha Sunile Haya Sarvanash. If anyone hears the Mayavadi's interpretation of the pastimes of the Lord, or their interpretation of Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, or any other Vedic literature, then he is doomed. Once one is associated with impersonalists, he never understand the personal feature of the Lord and his transcendental pastime. This is a heavy statement, saying that once one is associated with impersonalists, he can never understand the personal feature of the Lord and his transcendental pastime. Now, I was thinking, isn't it logical to hear from a devotee, a pure devotee, to experience the bliss of the pastimes, right? So, because we know that bhakti, or the transcendental pleasure, is actually a manifestation of Srimati Radharani, Aladini Shakti, right? Now, Aladini Shakti and Srimati Radharani, both are completely spiritual, 100% spiritual. It cannot be manufactured from a material source, or it cannot be arise from the material source, right? So, if one has to experience Aladini Shakti or transcendental pleasure of hearing pastimes of the Lord, one has to hear from who is actually experiencing the pleasure, right? And only a pure devotee who had the experience of that pleasure, he can only give that kind of a pleasure, right? So with this understanding, you can say that even logically, only a pure devotee, when he speaks the Srimad Bhagavatam or pastimes of the Lord, then hearer can experience that pleasure. Otherwise, it is not possible. If one is not a pure devotee, it is not at all possible. Right? So even logically, that is true. And the heavy statement Prabhupada says at the end, once one is associated with impersonalist, he can never understand the personal feature of the Lord and his transcendental pastimes. So this is again heavy. That means if one hears even once, they cannot understand the pastimes of the Lord. But the way I am understanding is, if they still continue to carry that impersonal conception, then they will not be able to experience the pastimes of the Lord. But if one starts again associating with the devotees and serving the devotees, so their impersonal conceptions become purified, and then one will be able to experience the transcendental bliss. So in fact, the example itself I was taking is Maitreya Muni itself. He was has some impersonal background. He's a Jnani, tendencies before hearing pastimes from the Lord himself directly, but he becomes purified and he becomes a pure devotee afterwards. So, yeah, with that, I would like to conclude today's reading. So, the pastimes of the Lord, specifically here, the Lord Varaha killing the Hiranyaksha, is heard by Vidura from Maitreya Muni, and Vidura became really transcendently happy, and it was very much pleased. One thing, because he is a great devotee of the Lord. Another thing is he is hearing from a bona fide source, Maitreya Muni. So this is the best combination to experience. I hear the pastimes of the Lord and experience the bliss. And Prabhupada in the purport, he also cautions whom we should not hear from. Why is it dangerous hearing pastimes from non-devotees of the Lord? Okay? So I will conclude there. If you have anyone of you have some discussion, please go ahead. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, Prabhuji, wonderful class. As usual, whenever you speak, I really like it, very detailed, very analyzed. Particularly the point of, like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saying that, if you hear or have association with Mayavada, and then you become like a serpent and you will never be able to understand the Lord's pastimes. It's a little bit, difficult to understand. Why? Because even in Chaitanya, like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's life, I forget the name of the governor of Madras. He was supposed to be a completely Mayavadi, scholar, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was able to talk to him, instruct him, and able to convert him. The same way, Maitreya Muni is an example. The four Kumaras are another example. That there's so many examples that we are coming across even in Bhagavatam, where somebody was Mayavada, and then they're turning into pure Vaishnavas. The same thing in our own lives. In this moment, we have so many of us who are from the Mayavada background, who have become, like I won't say, but who have entered this stream and trying to practice devotional service. So I just want to, address this point a little bit. So help me understand. Thank you, Prabhuji.
My understanding is, Prabhu, once we have a that impersonal conceptions, so it's actually difficult to remove those conceptions. So that is why, of course, it's not impossible. We have many examples. Impersonalists becoming personalists and devotees of the Lord, and right. Even in Chaitanya Charitamrita, like you were saying, there are many pastimes. Even Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is one of them. He becomes a very great devotee of the Lord. I think in general, it's actually very difficult unless they come in contact with a pure devotee and they get purified in their association. So then they have a chance. So that's my understanding. Just by hearing from the impersonalist, one will not be able to experience, or their conceptions will become very difficult for them to appreciate personal feature of the Lord in general. So that's my understanding, Prabhu.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhuji. So hearing from Mayavadis is what, if that is what is the issue, then if you look at Srimad Bhagavatam, though the credit is given to Sukadeva Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj, majority of the conversation inside it is between Maitreya Muni and Vidura, correct?
Yes,
So
Prabhu.
sorry if I'm
Definitely.
extending the argument. I'm just interested in knowing, that's
Yeah,
all.
yeah, yeah.
Thank
In fact,
you.
I thought I told already in the class. My understanding is
Uh-huh.
that Maitreya Muni, even though, in
Mhm.
fact, he heard from disciple succession. I
Okay.
think I forgot in the chapter 10 of this canto, I think, somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
that disciple succession is explained.
Yeah.
Maitreya Muni is, it starts from Lord Ananta,
Yeah.
and it all the way comes to Maitreya Muni.
Mm-hmm.
And he has some impersonal understanding, even like
Mm-hmm.
he is a category of the Jnani, is not in a pure Bhakta until
Mm-hmm.
he heard from the Lord, right?
Yeah.
That's our Acharya say.
Mm-hmm.
Once he hears from the Lord personally, then all his doubts get clear. He becomes like a pure devotee. He becomes, in fact, after that
Mm-hmm.
conversation with Uddhava,
Mm-hmm.
uh, he becomes kind of transformed. Uh, uh, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and he experiences the feelings of love towards the Lord.
Yeah. Okay.
So he
Okay.
becomes a devotee. Yeah. So some strong force has to be there to
Mhm.
transform those impersonal conceptions.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what my
Oh,
understanding, Prabhu. Yeah.
okay, Prabhuji. Thank you so
Hare
much.
Krishna.
Hare
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. No, thank you so much. I think I was also thinking about that because a lot of, some of us have at least, still have these impersonal conceptions of it. It's not that we think that God is not a person, but there are some conceptions there that we continue to carry, right? It's going to be very difficult to come out of it. As one gets purified, we'll come out of those conceptions, right? So, trying to avoid the personal relationships or whatever it is, right? Some of the impersonal conceptions. So I was thinking, yeah, the purification happens as one continues to hear. So I was just remembering, this statement is heavy statement. They kind of do. So there are two things. One is actually Mayavadi and the Brahmavadi, right? Brahmavadi, it is easy. When they get to know about the personal feature of the Lord, they will be easy. They will be able to move on, right? But the Mayavadi is the other one. I think that's what I was remembering I had earlier, right? So for them, it's very difficult. It's not that it's impossible. The statement says that, but then if same thing compares with the Bhagavad Gita statement, right? Krishna says he will push the demons down, down and down, lower and lower planets. As if it looks like there is no hope for them. It's actually there is no hope, Krishna says. But then it looks like it is not. But he actually I was hearing from I think his best Radhika Raman Prabhu recently. So it's not that Krishna is so unforgiving there, right? So it looks like that the statement because he was kind of very high in emotion or whatever it is because he was not happy with those people, and then he's saying like that. He was giving an example of when we speak to our children, right? I'll throw you out or something, whatever it is, some heavy statements, right? So really, we don't mean that. So the Prabhu was saying that it really doesn't mean that he will push those demons down. It's the same way I was understanding this statement also. It's not that they will never be able to come back. Of course, as you mentioned, and once they get association of pure devotees, it will be. They will be able to uncover their actual relationship with the Lord. The other thing, it's more difficult because something we have learned and we have to unlearn to learn something different. Right? That makes it more difficult. So, having these Mayavadi conceptions, right? So that's what I was thinking, Prabhu. But yeah, so I think the main thing is the purification that happens by hearing from a pure devotee. So that is the way one can come out of that. But yeah, as one has more conceptions and it takes more time to come out of these conceptions.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you very much for your explanation. Very nice. Yeah, I'm sure that devotees understand that difference Brahmavadis versus Mayavadis. So yeah, it's easy, as you said, easy to for Brahmavadis to become convinced than Mayavadis.
I think if there's no more discussion, you may end the call. So
Yes, Prabhu. If nothing is there, then thank you very much for your association. वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्यः च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। शिल प्रभुपाद की जय।